he really wanted Bernie to win in 2016. And now here he is, on the right and favorable towards Trump, et cetera. And I'll tell you, Emma, for a long time, I really resisted the whole Bernie to Trump pipeline conversation. But at this point, it's just undeniable.
Emma Vigeland was a guest on Breaking Points with Krystal Ball to talk about Bernie Sanders' appearance on Andrew Schulz show and this talk of Democrats, liberals, progressives going on these bro podcasts, and also the idea that the Democrats need a Joe Rogan of the left. It's a really interesting conversation to me. We're going to see what Krystal Ball and Emma Vigeland had to say about this. I'm going to share my thoughts on it too. Let's get into it together.
So interesting comments from Andrew Schulz and Charlemagne, who were, talking about the state of the Democratic Party and the state of the country at large. Let's go ahead and take a listen. They were reflecting also a little bit on that Bernie Sanders conversation with Flagrant, which did you watch that, Emma?
Yeah, I did. I thought it was really good overall, although I would say that Bernie's had some great conversations with some of this people in this podcast sphere, and they still go right, like Rogan, but we'll see.
True.
I mean,
well, he's only one man. What can you do?
Exactly.
All right, let's go ahead and take a listen to this clip.
You know what your reflection is? And Bernie said it on Flagrant. Everybody's blamed. This ain't a Democrat thing. It's not a Republican thing. This is government has failed the people. We live in a capitalist society where you got all of these all the wealth. Elon Musk has more wealth than more than half of the bottom of America. Like, come on. Like, there's no way we live in a society that claims to be the most wealthiest society on the planet and we can't fix homelessness.
Well, in that case, the Democrats' pivot should be to go more socialist. Yeah, which I'm fine with.
Yes, they should. That's what everybody's saying.
Bernie.
That's what everybody's saying.
Because the Republican solution to what you just described is going to be
deregulate
capitalism.
So they say the Democrat solution should be to go more socialist. What do you think, Emma?
I love to hear that, obviously. I think, that there's more of an appetite for this. I know you've spoken about this a lot within Democratic voters than I have seen since I've been doing this professionally or since I've been paying attention to politics, where there's this understanding where it's like we see Donald Trump wield the executive branch in a way, sometimes in ways I think are stretching the boundaries of our law, to put it mildly, but with the desire to govern and to be aggressive with his vision, however much I may disagree with many parts of that vision. It's highlighted the weakness of the Democrats, which also I think was evident in how Netanyahu quite clearly had his finger on the pulse of how weak the Democratic Party is, how he could exploit that tension there. And you see it in also electoral results with the Democrats, right? It's encouraging to hear that, just because I think, I was just having a conversation with one of my good friends from growing up, who listens to Rogan and listens to Theo Vaughn and things like that. And she was just talking about how Bernie Sanders makes a lot of sense when he goes on some of these shows. And I wish every Democrat could be talking about healthcare like that. This person's also kind of interested in RFK. And you see how, with the right having success in certain areas, say, let's take RFK Jr. and Trump adopting him into his coalition, for example. There's this massive anxiety in this country that people have around the issue of healthcare. And it's not just because they're worried about getting sick. Everybody in the world has that concern. But it's because medical debt is the number one cause of bankruptcy in this country. It's because you have anxiety that you're going to have to pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for routine visits to check if you're okay. You're going to have to pay a bunch of money if your kid has some sort of condition to see a specialist. There's a general anxiety that people feel when they relate to their healthcare. What RFK Jr. has proposed for people is a vision that is more libertarian, right? Where he's not in favor of a socialized healthcare system, but he does address people's anxiety and then sells them solutions that are a bit bespoke. Or his whole ecosystem is about, if you purchase certain supplements or if you do this kind of action, you individually can take control of your healthcare and it can empower you. I think that's what he sells. That's more of a libertarian view. But it has a narrow overlap with a leftist socialist vision that I wish we could kind of absorb into what we're advocating here, which is that, yes, you are right to feel anxiety about your healthcare. And here's how we can fix it. by cutting out the middleman between you and your healthcare and making it so that you have a direct relationship and you have socialized government insurance, and that we will guarantee healthcare for all as a right. We will fund it by taxing the billionaire class and not make it harder on your wallet. And those are just some of the ways that this vision is so much more poignant when you contrast it with the right, even the right that gestures towards things like economic populism or towards empowering you over your healthcare. So, you see how like these traditional paradigms of left and right, these consultants in DC on the Democratic side are missing it, and they're paid to miss it. But like, you can have somebody coming on Andrew Schulz's podcast who the other week he said that, you know, now he likes the Republicans because they get laid all the time.
Deep political analysis, yes.
Right. He can, and I have actually some other thoughts on that, but like he can have that view, but he can also say the Democrats should become more socialist. Like, this is what the independent voter is. It's not somebody who's like afraid of trans people.
Right. It's not ideologically consistent either.
Emma Vigeland and Krystal Ball, they're exactly correct with what they say. I want to get back to the socialism thing here in just a minute. But in terms of healthcare, another thing that the right wing and RFK Jr. are selling is this idea of, well, you know, if you get sick, it's probably because you did something wrong. You know, you're not exercising, you're not eating right. And that's a very much a libertarian view and a right wing view at this time. And that probably works well with a lot of the Joe Rogan listeners and viewers because they tend to be young males and they are, you know, probably not dealing with a lot of the health issues that some older person would deal with. But what none of this ever addresses is you can be the healthiest person in the world and be in a car accident or some other, you know, a healthy person could fall down the stairs and hit their head. And those kind of things happen to people all of the time, and you still need healthcare and health insurance to cover those things. So I think that's one area where the Democrats need to better address things to say, you need healthcare coverage for everything. Yes, exercising and eating right, you know, maybe that will help you to not have to deal with the healthcare system as much, but it's not going to completely make you immune to ever dealing with this horrible system that we have. In terms of what's going on with, you know, Andrew Schulz and these guys on his show saying, hey, we need to go more socialist. Again, this is the opportunity for the Democratic Party, the Democrats who actually believe in these things. That's a big part of the problem is you have a Democratic Party establishment that says, no, we want to continue to be Republican light and continue to lose elections as a result of that. And these are the kind of things that Emma Vigeland and Krystal Ball are talking about all the time. But if they want to actually transform the Democratic Party into a party that is going to defeat the Republicans going forward, have AOC and Bernie Sanders and members of the squad and whatever other Democrats there are who actually believe in going further left, and have people like Emma Vigeland and Krystal Ball on these bro shows to talk about these ideas that could appeal to these young male viewers who they're trying to get their votes.
Schulz, from my conversation with Bernie, I picked up that he had been a Bernie bro. He really wanted Bernie to win in 2016. And now here he is, you know, on the right and favorable towards Trump, et cetera. And I'll tell you, Emma, for a long time, I really resisted the whole Bernie to Trump pipeline conversation. But at this point, it's just undeniable. And, you know, part of that is certainly like the way that the bros in the Bernie coalition were smeared. All of us were smeared, by the way, as like toxic and sexist and racist and all these sorts of things.
You and I, we just hate women. Obviously.
Just hate women. That's what we're really known for here. But, you know, the whole movement was smeared, but in particular, the bros were smeared. And so that's certainly part of it. But part of it is just this sense that, you know, Trump was critical. And again, this is surface level. I'm not talking about the reality of the fact that he serves oligarchs perhaps more than any other Republican president in history has. Yeah. But he critiqued the party. He felt like he was a change and, you know, not sort of in the mainline old school Republican Party. Bernie had that same like critique of the Democratic Party. And at a time when faith in institutions has been broadly broken, like you have to be a critic from the outside. And that's how you can end up with someone who's like favorable George Trump, but is also like, hey, Democrats should try socialism. And I have to tell you, I think the biggest challenge Emma, that we have on the left right now is getting people to have faith in any sort of possibility of a collective project. That's why the libertarian appeal of like, well, you can work out, well, you can better yourself, well, you can take these supplements. Sure, the world is going to shit, but here's things in your life that you can have control over. That's why that has appeal right now. And, it reminds me, I think it has historical echoes with like the 1970s, the back to the land movement, where people tried the 60s, like collective change. It didn't work out. People were getting assassinated and they're like, all right, well, forget it. We're just checking out and we're going to go live on like a commune in Vermont and see what we can individually do in our own lives, separate and apart from society. And I do think that there is a pretty healthy strain of that right now, where it's like, I just don't, where a lot of people feel that there isn't a possibility of meaningful collective action that can better everyone's lives. And especially when you talk about, these big threats that are coming, like, I think people are increasingly concerned about technology and AI and what that's going to mean for all of us and what it's going to mean for our kids, et cetera. Like, I feel that instinct of like, let me just go live in the woods and disconnect.
Enclose.
And like try to protect me and mine and whatever. Like, I understand where that instinct comes from.
Right. And Naomi Klein and Astra Taylor had a piece that I've been recommending to everybody in The Guardian maybe a month ago at this point about the rise of end times fascism. And just
you did a great interview with her about that, by the way.
Wonderful. Yeah. I want to hear what you guys had to say too, but just the idea that like of fortressing yourself, right, in this time period, and fortressing the nation, protectionism, and even the way that the administration operates, where we're just going to get ours. Like, Trump is maybe the most pro-oligarch president in history, but it's really his or pro-billionaire, but it's really his billionaires too. Like, he's very focused on the folks that have benefited him and is trying to scratch their back to a degree. But like, I do want to be clear that I think, when Andrew Schultz's comment about how he used to be a Democrat because, like, can I swear on the show?
Yeah, you can swear on the show, yes.
Okay, because they fucked, or like, because like, Bill Clinton was a badass or whatever, and now he's all on board with Trump. He's got all the baby mamas. He's cool. I just want, part of me was like, you think Obama would have been able to get elected if he was like bragging about how many baby mamas he had, or if Hillary Clinton was like, yeah, I get laid, like, so I or Kamala Harris. I mean, honestly, there was a lot. The opening attack on her was that she slept her way to the top. And when I want to bring in the voters that, we're speaking about here, the Bernie or Trump people, the folks that are sometimes unnecessarily smeared as being like sexist or misogynist, but they just want somebody who wants to break up the system. But there is something that, if we're trying to also, at least from my end, the progressive left meld with Democratic voters, we should acknowledge that like the messenger also is important to some of these voters. Like,
that's
they
true.
Can listen to Bernie Sanders, but they tuned out Kamala Harris, who, like, if Trump had been putting forward the abundance agenda about deregulating housing and building more and more and giving X amount to first-time home buyers like Harris was doing, which was a more centrist kind of liberal, not left-wing policy, I don't think any of these guys would have had a problem with it. So there is that. I want to recognize that, because I think that's important for, like, say, the base of the Democratic Party. In many ways, these are people who feel like when Republicans get into power, it's an existential threat to them if they're a marginalized group. And that's really important that we have to incorporate. But it's also true that the independent voter isn't just how it's being characterized. The MAGA people, it's tough. There are the too far gones. But there are this group of folks who are open to different ideologies politically that they wouldn't have been, say, 20 or 30 years ago, along this very convenient spectrum for our ruling class of left versus right. There are people that are listening to this show that may like Trump, but may also hear Bernie and go, I just want somebody that's going to change things for my life. And these Democrats, they come off like bureaucrats. They don't offer anything transformational.
This is also a great point from Emma Vigeland, that it's not just the message, it's the messenger. The average voter, and like she's talking about independents, are not necessarily paying attention to all of the policy and, getting deep in the weeds of all of that. They really just want somebody who's decisive, and the Democrats, especially to the kind of these bro podcast guys like Andrew Schulz, just look kind of wimpy. And Bernie Sanders is not, he's not Obama. You're not going to label Bernie Sanders as cool, but Bernie Sanders is tough. He stands on his principles. He has his beliefs that he's been espousing for decades and decades and decades. And so he comes off to voters as decisive. And, you had a lot in 2016 and I believe in 2020 where you had people where Donald Trump was their first choice, Bernie Sanders was their second choice. They couldn't be much more different in terms of ideology. But like Emma Vigeland is saying there, apparently those voters looked at Trump and Bernie as both being people that would fight for them, whether that was true or not, or right or not. That was the perception. And as we know, particularly in politics now, perception is reality. Let me know what you think about all this. Do you agree with what Emma Vigeland and Krystal Ball are saying here about maybe these bro podcast guys like Andrew Schulz are gettable, that, it's looking like they're definitely favorable to the ideas of Bernie Sanders? And if you have more of an actual left kind of vision with the guest on these shows, what can that actually do in terms of elections and voting? Let me know what you think in the comments about all this. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I am Chris on Culture, and I'll see you in the next video.